Okay, today I'm talking to Stuart Ryan. Hi, Stuart.
Hi, Vic. How you doing?
Oh, yeah, good. Pleased to be chatting to you. Right, I've got a traditional first question, which is, what do you do?
What do I do? Very good question. I mean, on a very basic level, I am a guitar player. That's pretty much the only job I've ever had. But I think, like all of us, that really means you do 10 different things. You know, when people ask what I do, I more kind of stuff. I'm like a plumber, you know,
Yeah.
because a plumber doesn't do one thing; he does many different things. And I think that's the same for all us guitar players. So, you know, within that, there's sessions, composing, teaching, playing gigs, all manner of things. But yeah, many different things. I think the days of, you know, just being literally a guitar player where you jump on stage 300 nights a year and that's all you do, I kind of think they've gone maybe. You know, I think that used to be that used to be what a guitar player was, and what many people's conception of what a musician is. I think, you know, they just think you perform all the time, and that's that. You know, whenever we have these conversations with people, you kind of have to spell it out, don't you? I mean, for me, my dreaded situation is is the table at the wedding where you're sitting with 10 people you've never met, and you know everybody goes around. I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor,
Yeah.
and they ask you, and you think, oh, here we go.
Yeah, totally. That's why I tend to ask that question, because it's sort of a bit of a trick question, actually. It's because, as you say, particularly now, that thing that you're saying, you know, having an involvement in lots of different things to do with music has been sort of amplified, literally. No pun intended.
Very much so.
I interviewed a friend of mine who's a fantastic sax player, a guy called Graham Turner, and I said to, you know, what do you do? And he said, well, he said, somebody said to me that I used to be a saxophone player. He said, but I might only be a saxophone owner. Which I thought was quite funny. But
true.
So
it's true. It's true.
Let's get back to the beginnings of how you got involved with music. You know, when was your first sort of inklings that you might be playing the guitar at some point?
Yeah, it's a funny one with me. There's a story to this. When I was a kid, I grew up in a house where music was played all the time. It was Motown and Johnny Cash, basically what I grew up with. I grew up in Cheshire, and you know my dad was from Liverpool, so you'd think that I'd grow up surrounded by the Beatles, but my dad was kind of that school of people from Liverpool that were sick of the Beatles, so I never heard the Beatles when I was a kid. You know, I had to discover them later on because my dad just wasn't interested in them. You know, he vaguely knew, I think, Ringo Starr, so he'd been in that world, and to him they were just a band that got big. So you know, the Motown thing was what I grew up on, and it wasn't a musical household. I don't have brothers or sisters. I just have parents, and they didn't play anything. They never showed an interest in playing anything at all. So there were no instruments in the house whatsoever. And I never showed an interest in playing an instrument. I didn't ask for one. I played the recorder a little bit at school, but that killed my love of music at about 7 because I was so bad at sight reading. And I used to get humiliated by the teacher in the recorder quartet.
Yeah.
So, you know, as a kid, it wasn't there. And then when I hit 13, basically what happened is my parents saw friends of mine getting guitars and thought that might be something to try. You know, I guess what parents do. They go,
Yeah.
you know, we try the football thing, you know, we try the swimming thing. Then they got me a guitar. But they didn't really talk about it. And here's the bonkers part of the story. They didn't talk about it. They didn't say, should we get a guitar? What should we spend? They both went to the same shop in Liverpool on the same day independently, a place called Rushworth's. And they both looked at the same guitar. And one of them bought it and one of them didn't. I won't say which one. And when they got it home, they said, I looked at that today. Well, I bought it, you know. So
That's
they bought me
weird.
a classical guitar. Yeah, really
That's weird.
You know,
I like that.
It's really, yeah.
I said there'd be some weird stuff, didn't I?
Yeah, it's I never talked about it. It just appeared. But the funny thing is, I got picked up from school. So this is 1990. So I was just about 12 or 13. And my dad said, "We've bought you something." Thought it was computer games. Got really excited. Got home, and then they brought this guitar downstairs. And I remember I literally said, "What do I want that for?"
Really? Oh wow.
Yeah. What do I want? And I was really, it's just a grumpy 13-year-old because I didn't have whatever computer game I thought it was. So it went in a cupboard. It went in a cupboard for 6 months. But what happened then basically is all of a sudden guitar music got big again.
Yeah.
You had Guns N' Roses and AC/DC. It came back to the fore.
Yeah.
And so, of course, my friends at school were all playing guitars, and the curiosity kicked in.
Yeah.
And it came out of the cupboard. And, I just started playing around with it and suddenly thought, you know what? I think I like this.
Yeah.
And I had a few lessons at school. I had a short course of lessons. Then the big recession hit whenever, 1990, 91. My dad said to me one day, "Look, we can't afford lessons, but how about every month or so, I'll take you to the music shop. We'll buy you a music book and see if you can learn from that." I said, "Yeah, we'll do it." And that Saturday, he took me to a music shop. I'd been playing for about 4 months. So I bought the best of Chuck Berry.
Oh, wow.
Tried to figure out what was going on.
Wow.
Didn't have a clue. But then from then on, I learned in that kind of traditional way of the family friend.
Yeah.
The family friend who played a bit of guitar would come round, and he was a bit of a funny character. He never really showed me stuff, but he'd play. He wouldn't teach me stuff, but he'd play, and I'd see the chord shapes, and I'd see La Bamba shaking all over, all that kind of stuff. And so it started to come from there, and then just got absolutely hooked on it, like we all do. It became an absolute passion, and it's a 9-10 hour a day thing, basically. That kind of thing. So yeah.
I'm always intrigued by because obviously that's an interesting point, that sort of early 90s thing, because the tab books weren't really out until Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. That was the one that suddenly, I remember going round the music fairs, and because obviously I was using tab, teaching people with tab, but working things out off records and getting them onto tab, right? And then some guy from a publisher saying, because I was going around chatting to people, saying, we're bringing all these books out in tab. And I remember turning around to him and saying, "About time."
Yeah.
It was like, oh wow, so it was about time, because where have you been? Like, sort of thing.
So true. I mean, people forget you're 13, 14. You want to get it off you want to get it under the fingers immediately.
Yeah.
Sight reading's not there at all.
No.
Unless you're doing classical.
No. And even if you're doing classical, it's not the type, the sort of, unless you could read like violin music where it's all over the shop type of thing, you're not going to be able to get any of the nuances of the phrasing or anything, are you? Seriously. Because, but so that was an interesting point in time because, I've always said all the guitarists that you heard up to probably 1995 or something like that, something round about that time, they all played by, it was all ear driven, because the tab books, you'd need 5 years with tab books, wouldn't you, from like 1990 type of thing.
Well, I mean, I remember a family friend gave me a stack of guitar magazines. So he was
the Cherry,
but these were magazines
the
from
Cherry
the 80s.
Lane ones, the ones that came, they were
they were full of notation. They still had notation back then.
Yeah.
The lessons were all notated. So I mean, that kind of thing, was a blank page to me. But I think what really kicked it off for me was when the American magazines started to come over. So you had Guitar World.
Yeah, they were the ones. Yeah.
That was it. Every month my mum would take me to Smith's.
Yeah.
It's like a Bible every month, and you go in like that. I'd literally be shaking, I think, walking towards the newsstand, thinking, I wonder what songs they transcribed this month. And sometimes, there'd be Van Halen, Junk would be transcribed. And then other months it would be something where as a kid, you're not really interested in stuff that I love now, like Tom Petty or, something like that, or a Stones track. You go, what?
Yeah, the Stones track, particularly when they got they got the dad, you know, they got G, you know, whatever G tuning sort of thing, and it's like, oh, that is how honky tonk women. that's how you play that, you know, not trying to work out what it is in standard tuning. And again, it was the American guitar magazines first that actually, you know, they were really.
I mean, they could get the licenses.
Yes,
you know, they could transcribe, they could print the tunes. I've still got them all. You know, they live on a bookcase next to me, and I still dip into them. You know, they're great.
Yeah.
It was such an amazing resource.
So this is interesting. So you've gone from like, you know, what the hell is this guitar? You know, what do I want this for? To like 9 hours guitar playing a day type of thing. That's quite a steep curve. So so what's where does this go then? Where are we now? You're at school, and presumably you've got some kids that are all playing guitar or whatever that's sort of driving you along with this, because I think that's often what happens, isn't it? You know, you're not the sole.
That's it. You know,
you're not the sole musician or budding musician in the school.
There's a group of about four or five of us, a couple of kids in the year above, and you know, obviously when the kids are in the year above, you're always trying to impress them as well. And I had competition. There was a guy in the year above, and we basically, you know, we had this sort of friendly and sometimes not so friendly rivalry, and it was all who could learn the solo by Monday.
Yeah.
You know, I remember he learned the solo from Enter Sandman before me. And he set up his amp. No, he took my guitar and my amp on the Monday morning, on the Monday lunchtime, played it with the wah pedal, and stared at me all the way through.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of, I've done you. Yeah. You know, and that kind of fired me up against. It was like, right, you know, home for Thunderstruck tonight, or whatever it was. But so we had this kind of it's like a little riff share thing going on. You know, it was great.
Yeah, well, that's, this is great, because this is something actually that hasn't come across in the podcast, this thing about rivalry, particularly when it was difficult to get hold of the information, right, for stuff. And
because I think what people forget is that the information would come out 9 months after the album had been released. It's not like today, you know, kids these days, whatever song it is they want to learn, by tomorrow someone's done a YouTube video. Back then it's like, well, the tab book will be out, but
well, you know, you were working things out. I mean, if you were working things out off the recordings, which is obviously, you know, predating the tab books, but there'd be one bit you couldn't get. There's one bit you just couldn't get right, and then some other guy had that down somewhere, and you know, and it would be like you'd be sharing, you know, can you show me that bit in Stairway when it goes to that bit, because you knew he got that, and it'd be like, and I'll show you that thing that's in Little Wing. As a trade.
I mean, that's it. It really was what I called the riff share. You know, what have you worked out this weekend? What, you know, and you know, music. I went to a really academic school, so music wasn't encouraged in the slightest. I take my guitar in every day, but I used to have to hide it because I'd get told off for playing it at lunchtimes. You know, that you should be out doing football or working. So, you know, I got better and better at hiding it. And by that time, you know, I guess I was 15, 16. I had the long hair and everything, so you know, I was already not quite on track with everybody else, I think. But you know, I just loved it.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because it becomes your identity, doesn't it? Let's face it.
Exactly. At that age in particular, you know, you're either you're the sports guy, or you know, you're the super academic, or you know, typically there's always that smaller group of musical people, and you know, can we kind of you know, you start getting your first band at that age as well. You know, these things just kind of click into place, really. You know, my big wish, my big regret, I think, is that I didn't do the whole, because my school didn't do it. I didn't do the whole music GCSE, A-level music school thing, because that's your network. You know, by the time you get to music school, that's how you develop your network. And I sometimes look at that and think, I wish I'd done that rather than doing that conventional academic route, which I did. You know, which I had a great time, but you know, it didn't sort of take me in the direction professionally that I wanted to go in. But of course, you know, I think things were different then, really. You know, you didn't have the guitar schools in place. So
it was completely different. And to be honest, you know, that is a lament that people make. that have come up.
But my dad always says, my dad was super supportive, always is, still is. And he used to say, yeah, but you could have gone to music school and they'd have made you do things a certain way. They could have,
Exactly.
and
Exactly. I think
he's
that's
right.
the point, is that sort of lament of, I don't really know what I'm doing type of thing. I'm sort of, they're going to find me out,
Yes.
it's just,
Completely.
the imposter syndrome. And we all
Yeah,
have that.
completely.
And interestingly, in some of the, I spoke to John Etheridge, and John actually said something very similar. He said to me, yeah, because when I started teaching this stuff, I had to work out what it was that I was doing, and I thought, if it comes from that, and I've heard, well, a story, because I work with a guy called Sam Kelly, who's a great drummer, and Sam used to work for a while with Gary Moore.
Oh, wow.
And he said, they did, Gary Moore was throwing these little jazzy sort of things, and Sam said, we should go out and do a little 3-piece jazz thing. And Gary Moore said, oh, no, I can't do that. He said, why not? He said, because there'll be somebody out there who really knows how to play jazz. He said, I haven't got a clue. And you think, well, if that's, if that was true for Gary Moore, then, you think, well, come on.
You know what? It's true for all of us. Everybody has chinks in the armor, and you have to know what they are yourself, and kind of, I think, not hide them. There's things that I'm working on now that I go, oh, I wish I was better at that. I'm in awe of those guys.
It's just the way it is. But again, I really think not just being told and drilled into a way of thinking actually means that your own style comes out. And then later on, as you say, you look back and go, God, it would have been a lot easier if somebody just turned around and said, look, if you've done this, that's how that works. But again, you wouldn't have found your own way through that. You wouldn't have had your own.
It's all about the discovery, isn't it? It's how you make those discoveries, And I think the thing what it does do is it gives you the tenacity to overcome things that are causing you problems. As I say, because I never really had lessons. So there were times when, I'd be stuck in the rut. Like the Chuck Berry book. I'm like, what on earth is going on here? It's just a load of squiggles and numbers.
Yeah.
I want to play Johnny Be Good, but I've got no idea. I worked through that, the first 2 bars. It's probably about 4 months.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what tab was, let alone notation.
Yeah.
But when you do, I think when someone hasn't given it to you, the payoff is so much greater.
Yeah.
And it infuses you to then go to the next level, because you do think, well, if I can do that, I can do this.
Yeah.
And that's definitely part of it. I mean, you're not getting feedback. You're not doing your exams, and you're not being told you need to work on this. So you do, there are things that get left behind, which I think you have to come back to later. The first experience, I think, for many of us who go down that road is, when you first start playing with other musicians, all of a sudden you go, oh, hang on a minute. And so there's this thing called timing, and I'm not,
especially for guitarists. That's the sort of thing. If you spend a lot of time playing on your own in your bedroom, you've got your own sense of time, haven't you? And suddenly you're with a drummer, and it's like, oh, hello.
Yeah, completely. I mean, guitar is the ultimate bedroom instrument, isn't it? If you're a bassist, pretty soon you're going to go, well, I've got to play the drummer, and vice versa. Same with the vocalist. But guitar is just that, it's that self-contained instrument. And I think the scourge of many guitar players is that jam track world, that just descends into 4 or 5 minutes of I can do whatever I want, which is a lot of fun. We all do it, but it's when you get out and play with other people.
Yeah. It's like an addiction, isn't it? It's like the sort of echo chamber of me. That sort of thing.
I mean, that's the thing. I'm glad that when I started out, you didn't really get backing tracks. So what you do is you play along with the original recording. So when it was a rhythm part, you were playing a rhythm part. When it's the solo, you did the solo. Now, when you watch people, you see 5 minutes of soloing. And I like soloing, we all do, but I'm far more interested in rhythm and groove players. I love the Motown players, those guys that sat in a room and had to find the part, lock in, and you listen to it and you go, that harmony is bonkers.
Yeah,
they had to know what they were doing.
I think that's a really, really good point about those guys, because they were really on a production line.
Yeah.
Somebody came in, it was like, there's a singer here, and it was, and the part, they knew what they were going to do within the part, because it was the way they played, like the guys from Muscle Shoals
Yeah.
and all that lot.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, that comes in, we do this, and bang, out it goes, right? And you knew that once you got, it's, like Steve Cropper and whatever, you could tell a Steve Cropper guitar part, because it's going to be, what he's going to do, but that's how you get your sound. And I think, and again, like you're saying about this, you get kids to listen to those parts, whether that's like what the bass is going to do or whatever, and then get them to realize, well, it's functional, but it's absolutely nailed to what it is that these guys did, right? And their sound, and that's true with, you're talking about Johnny Cash. There's a great example of that band, that sort of groove that they had, but it was the thing that they did. They weren't going to wander off and do something else, because that's,
Exactly. I mean, I find that whole era, that whole era of the early studio days fascinating, because the thing you forget, I forgot myself, is the Motown guys, that Funk Brothers band, they do 3 tracks a day. But you forget they didn't know what the song was. So we listen back to, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, or whatever it is. Well, that was a Motown. Oh, yeah. But you listen back to that stuff and you go, oh, wow. And then you forget they didn't know who was singing on it. They didn't know the title. They didn't know the word. And I was watching an interview with, I think it was Dennis Coffey, one of the Funk Brothers, and he was saying, we didn't have the lyrics, we didn't have the vocals. So people always talk about the skill of finding the part in between the spaces, but they didn't even have that reference. The vocal hadn't been recorded. So their skill level must have been bonkers to be able to play through those tracks and think, well, this is going to be a verse, but this is going to be the end of that line. So on the end of beat 4, I'll have just a second to put in a lick, and then I'll have to stay out of the way again.
Exactly.
And it's the ultimate in taste, isn't it?
It
it's
is.
like they really have it nailed down. It's incredible.
It is.
Absolutely incredible.
It is. So this is what I mean. There's a sort of a linguistic structure, if you like, or syntax within the music that you can go, this is what I was saying. They knew what they were going to do, because that's how that type of music was functioning. They knew it probably as a language, actually, because I often think this with like the bluesmen, well, this is certainly true with the jazz players, they'd play something that's like, well, this is what Louis Armstrong would have said, type of thing, as a phrase, instead of it being, well, we're playing a whatever scale or whatever. It was more of it being about interpreting the language of something. And again, if you look at that from the guys in the studios, same thing. You knew if you were working for, I don't know, Otis Redding or whatever, Eddie Floyd or whatever. You had a sort of an idea, because that's your gig. You knew
what I always think is, what must have been like for those players when that language was suddenly disrupted. Like Coltrane records Giant Steps, and all of a sudden the language has literally changed. He's brought in a new language. Stevie Wonder comes along. Those Stevie chord progressions. You think, because I think you're totally right. I think it became, probably became formulaic for a lot of those players. It's another. Here's the chart, here's the progression, here's the tempo, it's going to be one of these. And then all of a sudden there's a seismic shift. And I sometimes wonder what it must have been like on, the Monday morning when Stevie suddenly changed his sound. And they're going, what? That must have been, in their shoes, it's incredible these guys were able to deal with it.
Well, I think actually this is an interesting point. Where rock and roll appears on the scene, right? And suddenly, if you look at pre-rock and roll, pre-Elvis or whatever, it's jazz, right? So you've got jazz guitarists. They've got gigs. They're working with, and suddenly it's gone. That style is not the most important anymore. So where's your work coming from?
Yeah.
So it's going to be rock and roll and country music.
Yeah.
So suddenly you get all these jazzers appearing in country music
Yeah.
and rock and roll. So I'm fascinated by this, that you start seeing that the jazz sensibility, we're following the chords type of thing, popping up. And really amazing, the way that like country music develops from that period on as well. And it's very different sort of thinking suddenly appearing. So you've got a lot of these session guys. Well, I mean, a good example of that is Carol Kay, the bass player. She was a jazz guitarist that suddenly was like, well, yeah, but everybody's short of a bass player type of thing. And I can read, and she's been like one of these sort of unsung heroes of a lot of that session work. She worked for everybody from Frank Zappa to
the whole Wrecking Crew. The whole Wrecking Crew. I was just reading about them yesterday, and it's the adaptability. And the Wrecking Crew is an interesting one because they went from the pop tracks, and then when everything changed in the 70s and became rock, all of a sudden they became superfluous. And those that could adapt went into film and TV. So Tommy Tedesco and Carol Kay. They were on soundtracks all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And then the tragic thing is how many of them just suddenly disappeared. Literally overnight.
Yeah.
They were replaced by the younger session guys, Larry Carlton and
Yeah.
Nathan East, and those guys. Kind of the generation shifts. And I guess that's always happened. And it is the adaptability is what keeps some going, and others, even with incredible skill sets, just become anachronistic all of a sudden.
So do you
it's also
sorry, carry on.
It's also interesting how some of them kind of like a Barney Kessel starts off as a jazz guy, becomes a session guy, but comes out the other end as a jazz guy, and is able to maintain that for his whole working career. It's just, I don't know, it's funny, isn't it? It sometimes seems so arbitrary.
Yeah, but I think actually what you're saying about the adaptability is the thing. These guys who are, it's not a case of the skill sets, it's about the adaptability, which goes back to what we were saying about how guitar developed with, the fact that you had to do it your way because it was there was no other way to do it. Information was pretty scant, and you had to really learn by making mistakes and everything. Whereas maybe if you just learn because somebody tells you something, that might not give you the adaptability.
It's true. Yeah, there's pros and cons. I love great classical players. I think the discipline's extraordinary. But I always look at that and go, how do you differentiate from all the other great classical players? Because they're playing the same repertoire. So, how do you become the person? And all the others who are fantastic just get lost.
Exactly.
It's quite terrifying. You go on YouTube and you look at some of these classical players who are off the scale, and yet they've got no presence. Same with some jazz players. I was watching some of the younger jazz players who are absolutely phenomenal now. I mean, the jazz guitar thing seems to have suddenly become this real exercise in counterpoint. All these guys are playing 2 and 3 moving lines these days, but getting the recognition and the exposure for it is so hard, and that's why I really find the guys like Barney Kessel and who's the other famous one? He passed away recently. Bucky Bizzarelli. These guys who perfectly balanced the kind of the day job with the gig in the evening. I think they were so shrewd. They weren't diehards.
I met Barney Kessel.
Wow.
And it was one of those sort of things you go, that was a period, that was a point, like an initiation, I suppose, is the best way to put it. Morris Summerfield, I think his name was, he had the music shop up north. He used to bring Barney Kessel over and do this thing called the Effective Guitarist. And it was like a 4-day masterclass thing. So I turn up as a sort of an 18-year-old to Newcastle, and to be honest, it was just blew me away. The first day, Kessel spoke about psychology. That was how it started off, and of course, I realise now that he was right in at all the sort of NLP stuff right at the beginning before it was really formulated. I've got a feeling, because people like Bandler knew people like Jerry Garcia and all that lot, Grateful Dead and Bon Jovi. But I got a feeling that there was some connection there, because he spoke a lot about sensory information and like he didn't call them submodalities, but it was all that type of thing, and how to learn sequences of chords and stuff like that. And it was all that type of thing, which at the time, I was just like, my God, it was incredible. It wasn't until I started to get into the sort of NLP stuff that I thought, oh, this is absolutely what Kessel was doing, you know. And he also had a way of being able to look at a great player, and of course he knew a lot of them, you know, personally, and he almost sort of got what was going on with them, you know. So you talked about Lester Young, and obviously he knew Stefan Grappelli, and he knew Django Reinhardt, and he sort of had what was there, like he'd modeled that thinking somehow. So yeah, he was fascinating, and just his way of understanding how to approach music. Like I'd heard Segovia make a comment like this, but he did this thing where he said, look, listen to this. I'm not playing the guitar. I'm Count Basie's orchestra. And he played, and he went, here are the trumpets. And he played this line, right?
Yeah.
Here's the bass part, right? And here's the saxes in the middle here. And the piano part's just sneaking in the doing. That's what's going on in my head. That was what he was doing, right? That's what's going on. Now hear that. And it was like, it was a revelation. Segovia had done this thing about it, the guitar being an orchestra, you know, this part's the cello. But it was that type of thing. So it's the psychology behind it. So I think, going back to what you're saying about Kessel, I think that was going on with him. It's like, yeah, there's my mindset for the gig, the jazz gig.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And this is when I've got to sit and play whatever it is, Riders on the Storm, for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was he had to do, you know. Not Riders on the Storm, that was the other one. What's the Ghost Riders in the Sky, I think, was one of his, the banes of his life. Yeah, it was something.
That's the thing, you know. I mean, the thing, it's easy to forget that, you know, all of us, on some jobs, it's not what you want to do. You know, people idealize it, but sometimes you do things. You go, oh, you know, I'm not really enjoying this, but you learn from everything, don't you? I think that's the most important thing. I did a few things last year that I didn't really want to do, but I thought, well, I'm going to learn stuff from doing them, be it a production thing or a playing thing. And, you know, I didn't enjoy the process at the time, but subsequently, you know, I learned. One of them I learned from mistakes I'd made, you know, and sometimes it goes beyond the music, doesn't it? Sometimes it's the people you're dealing with. You can learn from that kind of situation, the communication with somebody, and yeah, you got to learn from all of it. Enjoy it as much as possible, but I think always, you know, understand it's not always enjoyable, but then 99% of the time it is. And how many people can say that about what they do for a living? You know, we're very fortunate. We can't forget that. You know, so fortunate.
Yeah. So we normally I've sort of tracked people's path, and we've sort of done a massive.
I'm still only 18.
Which is absolutely awesome. Let's get back to, so I think you were at school.
Yeah,
doing the training off the riffs. So what happens next?
Well, from there, you know, it is that typical academic route. I went to university and, you know, I was doing an English degree. So I remember I got there, I looked at the timetable, you know, it's like 7 hours a week. And I remember thinking, it's a lot of free time. So that's when the practice schedule really ramped up. You know, I really got into Wes back then in a big way, you know. So, you know, I was learning all my Wes stuff and transcribing all that stuff. But I played loads of other stuff. I played rock and my dream, I think when I got there, I was 18, my dream was, I'm going to get a band and I'm going to do it this way. And I remember there's a thing called Band Society.
All right.
Yeah. And I thought, well, this is it. I'm going to meet like-minded people. Because I was writing music back then. I thought, this is it. Great. Never mind the academic side of things, within 6 months, etc. And I went to the Bandsoc meeting, and there were two people there. And I remember one guy was from up north, and further north than me. I said, what kind of music do you like? And he goes, I like soul. I said, what? Soul. Like, oh, soul. Okay. So we formed a terrible band that, lasted about 3 weeks. And then eventually I did manage to get a great soul band going. But what frustrated me, and this is coming back to the music school thing, everybody was doing engineering and IT. So, music was very much that thing they did on a Sunday afternoon. I wanted to do it every day. Yeah. So that's when me playing solo really started, because it's like, these guys don't want to do 8 hours on Tuesday. They've got coursework and lectures. And so I just started playing solo. I thought, if I want to do gigs, I've got to start doing this. And so by 18, 19, really, I was doing solo gigs in cafes and events and stuff like that, just because I couldn't, I didn't have that network of people. And that's the thing. I look at music school, and I'm so envious of people who are able to get together with like-minded people of the same age in the same room, rehearse a full set, and then do a gig, every
oh,
weekend,
yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Twice during the week. It's like, I really would have loved to have had that. But, as I say, I got myself playing solo, did the degree and all that sort of stuff, and then moved to London after that. And again, it's the same sort of things, like, right, now I'm going to get things going. And then you go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm one amongst 20,000 great musicians here. I had a great time. I was in London for about 4 years, just did endless jam sessions, basically. That was my real education, I think, was endless jam sessions. Jazz one night, country another night. I had a job temporarily. Briefly had a job, and I'd leave the office, race home, get the guitar, race back into London again, and I'd do that 3 or 4 nights a week. So I was always knackered. I was always getting home at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and up at 6 to go to some pointless office. And that was it. That shaped it. I remember thinking, right, I've got to do the music thing somehow. It's very hard, isn't it? You don't apply for the position of guitar player. There's no career path.
No, well, that's the thing. Career path.
But I naively, I thought there was. I remember finding a few session agencies and thought, well, I'll get in touch with them.
Yeah.
I'll be in Abbey Road by Wednesday.
Yeah, well, the thing is that again, going back to the sort of college thing, there is this sort of idea that people think there is a career path, and it's like, well, there isn't one. So it's a case of you doing your own, making your own way. It's much more sort of like an entrepreneurial thing, isn't it? Music.
It really is. I mean, I think that's the thing that gets completely overlooked, is that at least 50% of it is an entrepreneurial thing, and you have to adopt that mindset that this is a job. It has to be treated like a job, and somehow you've got to monetize either your time or create assets, because nobody's coming to save you, really. That's the other thing. I think you trundle along for a while thinking, well, I'll probably get a call to be in so-and-so's group, and we know people that have been in that world, and typically it's been a fluke encounter or the network that's got them there. But no one, I think there's possibly this presumption that people trawl YouTube looking for their guitar player or their bass player or whatever. It's like, not at all,
No.
That's the network and what you've done.
There's a couple of things there. I had an interview with a guy that was saying that he went to college, music college, and he said they did this thing on networking. And he said, and it was hilarious. He said, because at the time you thought, oh yeah, we do that, we do networking. He said, really, they should just said, look, guys, just go and have a beer with somebody. Just hang out with people and be normal. He said, but what happens is you're you're not normal when you're trying to network, you know, and you see this on like social media all the time, don't you? Where people are literally, obviously networking, you know, and
Oh gosh, yeah.
and it just comes out really false. And it's like, that is the thing about being a musician. You've just got to get on with people.
Yeah.
You know, be the sort of guy that somebody goes like, "You short of a bass player?" "Oh, my mate so and so." You know, because that's the point. It's a chemistry thing. You know, you've got to get on with people, and really, if you're trying to put a band together, it's much better when you think you've met somebody and you know they're going to fit in than try to audition.
Yes.
A bunch of
Yeah.
people.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. Because by the time you've done all that business and you're sitting in a car with someone, I remember one of my first ever trips abroad. It's just a function gig, but I remember coming back with the drummer in the band who I didn't really. I knew him reasonably well, but not that well. And he just played prog rock for 9 hours, driving back from Germany. You know, I remember thinking, let me out. You know, I just had this progressive rock soundtrack for 9 hours. I remember thinking, you know, you're a great musician, but I can't take much more. You know, where's the ferry? And you're right. You know, you got to want to spend time with people, and you know, get rid of the ego completely as well, because that's the other thing which you know does it sometimes. You think, well, this guy's great, but that ego, you know, I can't work with it. You know, we've all been in those situations.
Yeah. So with your solo playing, you know, your solo gigs and stuff, I mean, when you see somebody who's a really good solo guitarist, there's obviously plenty of work out there, isn't there? If you sort of,
I mean, there
well,
is.
there was anyway. I don't know about now, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, ironically, I don't do very much of it now.
No.
You know, I do a lot more electric guitar and different kind of things. I still do it. I mean, I'll give you a basic roadmap of that. You know, what I discovered, the thing I discovered was that getting going, if you're doing a band, can take a long time and lead nowhere. You could spend 3 or 4 years doing that, and then at the end of it, you all come out of it and go, didn't really happen, didn't get the material, nothing happened, and now we're all, you know, late 20s. So for me, it's like, how can I just get out and do it? How can I just get playing, get round interesting people, and develop those skills that I need to? And I found that solo playing was a thing, and I was lucky in that I started doing the solo thing kind of at the right time, because it was, you know, better people than me who'd set it all up beforehand. So people like Gordon Giltrap, Martin Taylor, a guy who was my mentor called Eric Roach. They basically set up, and you know, going back to the 60s and 70s, of course, you had Barney Castle and all those people. But in terms of taking it out of fingerstyle jazz and making it, you know, you could play a Beatles song or you could play a Nirvana song. So all of a sudden, this scene existed, you know, and it's kind of fortuitous. So I was able to write off to promoters who were doing guitar festivals and say, can I come and do a set? You know, and so I used to get in the car with my dad and we'd travel. Like you and going to see Barney Castle, you know, we'd go up to Scotland and do a festival there. And, you know, I remember a memory of my dad. We went to Martin Taylor's Guitar Festival in, I think, 2002. Okay, so a few things I forget. 2001, I was like, I've got to try and do something. I don't have a music degree. How can I have, like, you know, a business card? And I saw that there was a thing called the Perrier Young Jazz Musician of the Year Award. So I went in for that. And I didn't win it, but I got to the last 4. So that gave me some confidence. And in the following year, 2002, I think it was, Guitarist magazine did their annual Acoustic Guitarist of the Year competition. So I entered that and I won that. So all of a sudden it's like, well, you know, I don't have a music degree. I don't have a network of musicians, but maybe I can sort of, you know, maybe these things will open some small doors. And we went to Martin Taylor's Guitar Festival in 2002. And on the closing night, you know, it's a great big crowd in a huge marquee. It was fantastic. I loved it. And I was there with my dad just watching the last night. And my dad said, you'll be here next year. I said, oh, don't be ridiculous. You know, don't be ridiculous. And the following year, I did, you know, I got a slot on that festival. And so that's how it all started. You know, I'd do that festival and another festival, you know, a week here, a week there. And I think it just gave me the confidence to think, well, yeah, I can do this. I can make some money from it. People seem to want to hear me. And so that's how it started as a career, basically. And of course, alongside that, you start teaching as well, which is great fun because, as we were saying earlier, as John Etheridge said, all of a sudden you're going,
Yeah.
I better learn some of these things. I mean,
Yeah.
I still remember the first guitar lesson I ever gave was hilarious. The night before, I'd got a teaching gig in a little music shop in the local town. And the night before, I'd stayed up really late preparing all this stuff like, melodic minor modes and, triads and 13th chords and all that. I was thinking, better get some jazz charts in place and some finger picking. And literally, there I am, 9:30 in the morning. And, we've all been there, the tiny, freezing cold teaching room with that 1-bar electric heater, waiting for the first guy. And he comes in. You think, right, what's he going to want? Is it going to be the solo from Jump? Or is it going to be some Terega? I said, what do you want to learn? He goes, I don't know. So, well, what kind of music do you like? And he goes, all of it, really. And I sat there for 10 minutes. I said, what do you want to learn? He goes, riffs. So all of a sudden, I was like, right. And I played about 8 riffs, and we finally settled on Run to You by Bryan Adams.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that'll do, teach me that. I
Yeah.
taught him that, and then thought, oh,
Yeah.
right, okay, I misjudged this then.
Yeah. It is such an experience, isn't it, teaching? Because you actually learn so much by teaching other people. It's just an amazing.
You really do.
Yeah.
You really do. And teaching workshops, sometimes you feel, am I only one step ahead? Am I?
Oh well.
Yeah. We all have it.
Oh, we've all had that, haven't we? I mean, I can remember because obviously I'm a bit long in the tooth here, but I remember some kid coming in, and this is like going back a long time, and he did this fingerboard tapping thing, and I thought, okay. So I sort of, and very quickly, because it was obviously as soon as basically Van Halen had got something out, but it was only a little part of something, But I managed to sort of work out what he was doing and was able to sort of turn it around and go, well, okay, let me show you what's going on here. So it was able to, but it was literally that sort of thing. And suddenly you think like, oh my God, what's that?
Yeah.
And then you suddenly have to turn that around and make sense of it to them. So they can go like, oh, really? I didn't realize that that's what was going on, type of thing. And it makes you really quick on your feet, doesn't it, teaching?
Yeah, it really does. And there's always that thing, I think sometimes you have to say to people, you know what, I'm going to have to get back to you on that.
Yeah. Just go away and learn it.
Because for me, it's like when I was doing masterclasses and stuff like that, someone would play, maybe they play like a John Renbourn piece, I didn't play any John Renbourn. You suddenly go, wow, I better check this out. I mean, the thing I find overwhelming about what we do in guitar playing is just the amount of repertoire. I really find it overwhelming. And you go, I'm kind of, the people I think have got it nailed are those people that just have massive repertoires. So many of us fixate on the nuts and bolts. We go deeper and deeper into theory and learning how to solo and chord voicings and all this sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm just in awe of those people. Not just jazz, but you've got those jazz guys that know 2,000 songs.
Yeah.
You think, what? Or people from any genre, bluegrass players, they know the bluegrass canon. Yeah. And that's the kind of thing where I'm really intrigued by those people that actually just do work within one genre. Yeah. So you'll have your bluegrass player in Nashville who is a bluegrass player. They don't deviate, but they're so in that genre. I often feel like a jack of all trades. But
I think that's definitely something with guitar generally, isn't it? You've got a jack of all trades.
You really do. And there's pros and cons to that. And I think we all need some sort of specialism. But I'm always in awe of those people that are so deep in the genre. Typically they've been doing it since they were 3 or 4. So coming back to language, it is a language to them.
Yes.
And they've got the canon in place. They know all the tunes. And I'm kind of jealous, I think, of that actually. It must be nice to just have that endless repertoire of things. And then you can play with people.
I tell you what was interesting on that sort of thing. There's a lady that I know who's a fiddle player, right? And of course she plays lots of folk clubs and stuff like that, and she sings and whatever. But her repertoire is amazing, you know.
Mm.
And I don't think she realizes quite how good she is. But those sort of things of being able to go from this sort of jig to that jig and literally just be able
Yes.
to drop in
True.
is really quite
Yeah.
something, you know.
Yeah.
And I sort of I've been trying to get to interview her actually but she, I don't know, it's one of those sort of things you sort of think, it's like, yeah, you've got a skill level which I don't think you realize
Yeah.
quite how much skill you've got here. Because I mean,
Yeah.
she's a great fiddle player and everything like that, and she's a good singer. But it's the whole thing of, you know, how many songs she's got is just really quite
That's
amazing.
it. I mean, I think that's the thing where it's either a cultural thing or it's something you've done since such a young age that you don't even think about it. You know,
Yeah.
I know people that have got huge repertoires,
Mm.
but they don't think about it. They'd never go, I know
No.
all these songs.
That's, yeah,
You
exactly.
know,
No.
it's just innate. And I think what a lot of us do is, you know, we do, you know, professionally we have to, you know, I have to be able to play all these different styles.
Yeah.
But I do look at it and go, there's something nice about committing, isn't there? And just saying, no, I'm not going to play. You know, I'm not a blues player. I'm not a jazz player. This is me. You know, and you go down that road.
Yeah.
But then again, it's also, I don't know, this day and age, it is probably quite impractical because all of a sudden you're closing a load of doors.
Yeah.
So
I think it depends, doesn't it? I think you get to that point where if you're known for something, going back to Barney Castle, because he actually said this, he got to a point which was like, if somebody rang him up and said, look, I want you to play some sort of like Latin guitar, he'd go, no, talk to Lorenzo Almeida, you know,
yeah,
here's his number, type of thing. But, you know, that's not my bag anymore. I do this.
yes,
I think there comes that sort of point where when you're known for something and that's where you're going to be with your thing, you can
yeah.
do that.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think you do. You know, you probably do find that thing maybe that ultimately you go, you know, this is me. I sometimes have a vision of myself in 30 years' time, just with one guitar, you know, really great classical, and just learning all that stuff, you know, and that's
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Who
Well,
knows?
so what have you got lined up now? Considering everything's a bit still up for grabs, isn't it? But what are you sort of doing and
You know
what are
what?
you aiming
I've been all right because I kind of shifted what I was doing just prior to everything. You know, I was playing live less and less. I like it, but I was getting a bit sick of traveling and you know, planes and guitars is hard work. And my passion, you know, I kind of, because I grew up on the whole Guitar Mag thing, you know, I wrote a column for Guitar Mag for 15 years and I
I know you
loved
do.
that. And
Yeah.
that came to an end. But my real passion, you know, is in doing the books and the stuff like that. So that's what I've been doing, you know, the last 18 months too. I mean, I've written, sorry, I should qualify. I've written books over the last 7 or 8 years, but I've been branching out from fingerstyling to all manner of things. And I'm really enjoying doing the books and courses and stuff like that. You know, I did quite a few online sessions last year as well, which is always fun. But sessions, you know, it's always someone else's thing.
Yeah.
You know, you always, you know, I was doing a few film scores and stuff like that, but it's always replace a part or make it sound like X. And I like that, but you don't have ownership on it. But the books thing I love. I'm doing a sequel to my Soul book at the moment. Hence, I was talking about the Motown guys earlier because I love the research.
Yeah.
I just love being able to get deep into it and go, who played guitar on this? You know, who played that guitar part? Who played that guitar part? So more and more, what I'm doing is that kind of thing. And I'm really, really enjoying it at the moment. You know, obviously we can't go anywhere. You know, the gigs are coming back. I haven't got any solo gigs, I don't think, lined up at the moment. But then, I mean, solo's a funny thing anyway, because it is putting yourself through the ringer for 90 minutes, really, you know, because you're playing for guitar players and their wives. I hate to say it, but that's typically what you're doing. You're paying for, you know, guitar players listen with their eyes. And it's sometimes nice to not be in that environment where your every mistake, you know, you sometimes feel like people are hoping for the next mistake, you know, and it's a funny one, solo guitar. I love it, but also there's too much other music out there as well for me. to just do that. So
Mm.
this year is really going to be about getting a couple more books out, I think, and not worry so much about the live thing. I mean, what about you? What your plans for the year? Because it seems to be opening up again.
Yeah. I've got a few interesting projects on. Again, like we were saying, we're all jack of all trades sort of thing. So I'm doing, because I'm interested in the sort of psychological aspect of music and things. So I've got a thing that sort of runs off my sort of Patreon stuff, which does all this. So I've got one called Magical Songwriting, which is using psychology, and also I'm looking at, what we would have termed as magical thinking. That's, you find in sort of folk music and different musical traditions where music is like used for healing or something like that. So I'm using those ideas, but then also looking at where that crops up in pop music. So obviously people like Bowie and Lennon and Mark Bolan, Kurt Cobain, they were all using this technique of William S. Burroughs called cut up. So all of that. So I teach all of that. I also do another thing, which is sort of like what I call the NLP trick bag, which is teaching people psychological things, use of language and stuff. So that's based in sort of things like hypnosis and stuff, which again, I mentioned about Barney Kessel using a lot of those type of ideas for learning. So there's that aspect of it. I'm going to be doing an online album with a band that I used to be with years and years ago, and it was just a sort of a harebrained idea that we could just, I come up with a musical idea that sounded like the song that this band never did. But it sounded like them. Yeah. So I contacted everybody and said, do you fancy it? And so that's on the cards. I've obviously got all my online teaching stuff. I've got this podcast I do, and I've got a music charity, which is again teaching kids, songwriting techniques for free. But at the moment it's a bit tricky because schools have been in and not in, and then in again. Yes. Nobody's checking emails. Yeah. So I've got to that needs a little bit more work. So I'm just, that's the sort of things I've been doing, and doing a bit of examining for the RGT. So,
I mean, a very, very, very strange year. I think if we've survived it, we're just grateful to have survived it, because I've seen a lot of people who've had to change career completely, and it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that playing wasn't sort of like the bread and butter, go out and do the gig, get the money. But the gigs were always sort of like, this is a showcase to stuff, as well as it being some money in the bank. But it was it's a showcase to an idea, or I've got this project running, I've got a load of kids involved. I do a lot of that stuff where I'm mixing professional players with amateurs and coming up with.
I think one thing people don't address is that professional musicianship in the UK is very different to other countries. In the UK, you can't go out and say, I will guarantee this amount of gigs a month. In America, I'm always fascinated when you go online in America, you're just reading, forums about gear or whatever. You've got all these guys that are like, well, on Monday night, I take the old Vox. On the Wednesday gig, I'm taking the Princeton, and I think I'll play my Strat on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You think, over there, you can do that. You've got that network, and the musical culture's there. But over here, gigging, if you said to yourself, I want 3 gigs a week, I don't really know how you do it, to be honest.
No.
At best, people seem to put a tour together, but that's one isolated block of time. So I think we do live in a country where you have to be realistic and say, in some ways, the gig is almost the icing on the cake.
Yes.
It's the fun part of it, really.
Yes, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, okay, we're lucky that we've got pubs and stuff like that, because I mean, places like Greece and whatever, getting gigs if you're playing sort of contemporary music, rock music, whatever, is really difficult. But I think it means that, you know, as I say, you've got to be really creative about what you're going to do. You can't just sit and go, I'm just going to do, like, perhaps it might be the case in America, you know, Monday night's my country music night and Wednesday night's going to be my blues night type of thing. Because you're looking at things and go, well, actually, you know, what's happening at the moment? Well, I've got to do something that's using this wrapper, you know, just literally whatever comes out of the mix, which, you know, again, you know, goods and bads in that, isn't there? So
I think that's where we all are these days. You know, I think you just need to be diverse and have really open ears, and take as much enjoyment from all of it as you can. And I think, you know, maybe we're no longer in that time where people will just be one thing. You know, maybe, you know, I know friends that are in the West End. You know, that's, you know, that that seems to be the only place where you can say I play every day.
Yeah,
seems to be that West End gig, and many of them have sort of foregone, you know, studio gigs or whatever to get into that because they know that's a guaranteed gig every day. And maybe that's where it is now in this country. You know, maybe that is the final place.
Yeah,
and otherwise gigs are a very kind of thing. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Things are coming back, at least. There's a rave in Liverpool last week, so
well, that's good then. At least
now we know what we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. Yeah. Well, Stuart, that's brilliant, mate. That was such a good chat, and it's
no problem, Vic. I loved it.
It's nice to get a bit anarchy every now and again because.
Well, at least we didn't get talking about gear. That would have been game over.
Oh no! I did have one podcast where it did sort of end up with, you know, discussing what type of strings, but we managed to veer away from that at least. Anyway, so all the best for that, for, you know, what you're doing, mate, and obviously send me some stuff so I can put all the things in the show notes so people can sort of contact you if you know, we can point them in the direction that you want them to go in. Interested in about all your books and things. So
yeah, great. I'll send all that over. I mean, the best thing is, you know, if you just type in Stuart Ryan music into Google, that kind of takes you to the right place. But I'll send you some links.
I'll put some stuff up anyway. So
fantastic.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for the invite.
Well, thank you. I'm always, you know, pleased that people are willing to talk to me, because I'm sort of nosy. All right, mate. I'll see you soon. Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, I enjoyed that. You probably tell a lot of anarchy bits in there. So thanks to Stuart, and you can obviously find out details about Stuart's stuff on the show notes, and also if you want to support the podcast and the charity, that's all on the show notes as well. So until next time, I'll see you then.